The Chicken Asylum, an Alex Reynolds mystery. Author, Fred Hunter. Publisher, St. Martin's, Griffin, New York. Narrator, Eric Aust. Chapter 11. Mother arrived in the dark blue Saturn about 20 minutes after I made the call. She pulled up into the loading zone in front of the theater and honked the horn in a ladylike manner. I'll never know how she manages that. I gave Peter a peck on the cheek and went out to join her. Of course, I hadn't told her anything over the phone other than the fact that I needed her to pick me up, so she was bursting with curiosity when I climbed into the car. I told her everything Stevie had said. Well, almost everything. She greeted the news of James's disappearance with grave displeasure. "Good Lord, what can that boy be up to?" she said, staring out through the windshield. "I don't know." Peter's inclined to believe the worst. At this point, you can hardly blame him. You were the one inclined to feel that way before. What do you think now? I shook my head and sighed heavily. It's like the phone call. I can't see any good reason for him to do it, but Mother picked up for me. But he's been treated shabbily, and despite the way things look, you don't want to believe ill of him. Idiotic, isn't it? She smiled lovingly. Perhaps. But it does you credit, as long as it doesn't get us killed. The question is, what do we do now? She thought about this. I think we should go to the Imperial Inn. We need to talk to Larry. Why? To see if they found out anything and all your ideas about what might have happened to James. One thing has escaped you. Perhaps our agents found him. The Imperial Inn was built in the 50s and looked it. Perched on a corner of Lakeshore Drive, just north of Navy Pier, the hotel roughly resembled a large pile of old-fashioned hat boxes, sort of in the mode of the old Capitol Records building out in L.A. It looked like the kind of place the Jetsons would stay on a weekend jaunt to Chicago. A multi-level parking lot was tacked onto the back of the hotel like an afterthought. Each level of the lot was a maze of dangerous, blind angles that the builders tried to mitigate by the use of sound mirrors suspended at each corner, which had the unfortunate effect of startling drivers into thinking they were about to collide with themselves. I considered it very lucky that Mother found an empty space on the second level before either of us had a heart attack. We took the stairs down to the first level, bypassed the side door of the hotel, and went to the main entrance. The lobby was swarming with 30-somethings, all headed in different directions, each one dragging along sets of matching luggage on wheels. Mother clucked her tongue at the sight of them. You know, when I was younger, we were more adventurous. We used to travel the world with barely a change of linen. Now people aren't satisfied unless they're toting along all their earthly possessions. Wherever they go, it's rather like the beautiful person's version of a trailer home, don't you think? She stopped when she noticed my expression. What on earth are you looking at me like that for? You don't agree? No. I'm horrified at the thought that you were more adventurous when you were younger than you are now. What did you do, fly combat missions with the RAF? I'm afraid I'm not allowed to discuss it, she said, given some of the things Mother has done over the past 5 years. I wish I could have been more sure that she was joking. Come along, she said a bit impatiently. We've got to find Larry. As she swept up to the front desk where a crisp, energetic young woman in a bright blue blazer was talking on the phone. Yes, we do have that available, she said as her fingers scampered across the keyboard of her computer. Would you like that? I can reserve it on a credit card. She typed in the number, repeated the information, then said, Yes, we'll be looking forward to seeing you. Bye-bye now. She replaced the receiver and squared a pair of light brown eyes at Mother, as if she would be the most important person in the world for the next 30 seconds. Yes, and may I help you? We're here to see Lawrence Nelson. Could you give us his room number? Yes. I'm afraid I can't do that. Yes, you can't, Mother said after a beat. The young woman reached for the phone. Yes, but may I tell him who's calling? "Mm, yes, I suppose you may," Mother replied with a touch of loftiness. "The names are Jean and Alex Reynolds." "Yes, Mr. Nelson," the woman said into the phone. "There is a Jean and Alex Reynolds to see you. May I send them up?" "Yes." "Thank you." She hung up the phone and looked at Mother. "Yes, you may go up. Mr. Nelson is in room 501. The elevators would be around the corner to the left." "Oh, would they?" said Mother with a coy smile. The young woman blinked blankly. "Yes." Mother glided away from the desk, and I followed close at her heels. "You were a bit peculiar with her, weren't you?" I said as we waited for the elevator. "I'm feeling a bit peculiar," she gave the already lighted up button another couple of thumps. "Honestly, I can't abide officious people, especially when I'm in a hurry." She pressed the button again. It was very unlike her to be so outwardly impatient. A sure sign that she was more worried than she would have liked to let on. She gave a silent snort when the doors opened, expressing her annoyance with the recalcitrant conveyance. We rode up to the 5th floor and stepped into a hallway that was narrow and circular with a very low ceiling. There was a row of insistently identical doors on the outside wall. It was like being in the middle of some sort of warped luxury liner. Room 501 was the first room to the right of the elevators. The door opened just as I raised my knuckles to knock. As always, Nelson looked like he was on his way to chair a meeting of the Fortune 500. He was wearing a navy blue suit, white shirt, and blue tie with thin maroon stripes. I'll never understand how a government agent can always look so urban, especially on his salary. "Come in," he said, stepping aside to allow us to enter. The room was surprisingly bright and airy, despite the dark brown carpeting. The desk and table were made of fake wood in a light shade, and the spread on the double bed was nubbly cream. White shears were rustling in the late breeze through the open windows. "Our tax dollars stretched to this," I said as he closed the door. "You don't look at all surprised to see us. Could it be you already knew we were on our way here?" "The front desk did tell me," he replied without inflection. "Oh, yeah, right. I meant that as a challenge, and the fact that we were being tailed and only managed to embarrass myself. I could feel my cheeks going red." "What brings you here?" "That should be obvious," said Mother. "We wanted news of James. Have you heard anything?" "Have a seat," he said, motioning to the 2 chairs by the table. He pulled the desk chair over to join us. If he believed that we knew where James was, he didn't show it in the matter-of-fact way he addressed us. "Frederick's people and the police are combing the city. As much as that is possible. As far as I know, they haven't come up with anything yet." "As far as you know," I said. "Wouldn't they tell you?" "We're supposed to be cooperating in this matter, yes." "Aren't they?" "To the best of my knowledge." "What are you, Ronald Reagan?" I said irritably. "Can't you answer anything directly?" He took a long pause before he responded. "James has not been found yet. I would have been informed of that." I sat back in my chair and my mouth hanging open. "Oh my God, they've taken you out of the loop, haven't they? They're not telling you anything." "I'm sure you've noticed that there's a certain amount of strain between the FBI and the CIA?" "You mean distrust, don't you?" Mother asked. Nelson looked across the table at her without emotion. "Not on my part." "Of course not," I said. Mother's face lost some of its color. "It's us, isn't it? We're to blame. This Fredericks fellow thinks we're helping James, and you're guilty by association. Is that it?" "I can't tell what Agent Fredericks is thinking. I don't believe he's ever been exactly trusting." Mother frowned sympathetically. "Larry, I'm so sorry if anything we've done, I should say. I'm sorry if we've caused you any trouble." "No trouble. I've worked with a lot of agents over the years, and my experience, they generally come in 2 types. Those who think everyone is lying, and those who don't show you that they think everyone is lying." "Are you saying you fall into the later category?" Mother asked after a lengthy pause. I like to think of myself as special. Oh, that you are. Look, Nelson, Fredericks told us flat out that he thought we were aiding James, I said. And if that wasn't enough, now he's having us followed. What we want to know is, what do you think? His head pivoted in my direction. I know you well enough to rely on you to do what you believe is the right thing. Thank you very much, Larry, said Mother. That tells us absolutely nothing. He folded his hands on the table and leaned in slightly. I can tell you this. If I didn't think I could trust you, I would cut you loose. Mother's eyebrows went up, as did mine. Ever since Fredericks made that scene in our house, I'd had the distinct impression that Nelson believed we were helping James. If that was true, then from what he just said, either he also thought we were doing the right thing, or he had an agenda all of his own that nobody, including Fredericks, was in on, and we were playing into it. While you're in such a straightforward mood, would you tell us something else? I asked. He inclined his head. Do you think James is a member of the Red Jihad? Nelson sat back in his chair. I don't know. Oh, come on, Larry. What do you expect me to say? Initially, I would have said no. I don't think he's a member. But making that phone call, disappearing from the bar, these things have cast some doubt. So the most accurate answer I can give you is, I don't know. I heaved a frustrated sigh. But you must think something. Nelson leveled his eyes at me. I think that you want to believe James, and perhaps go a bit further for him than would be strictly prudent, because he's gay. It was several seconds before the full sting of this hit me. That's not true. I'm not saying it's the only reason, Nelson continued calmly, only that it's a factor for you where it isn't for me. I started to protest again, but he held up a palm. Think about it for a minute, Alex. If James wasn't gay, if he was just another Iraqi soldier who said he wanted to defect, if you'd taken him into a different kind of bar and had caught him making that phone call, what would you have done? I did give that some thought, a little reluctantly, and I didn't like what I was seeing. Under the circumstances he just described, I don't think we would have asked James to explain the call first. We would have gone straight to Nelson, as we'd been instructed, and reported it a lot more forthrightly than we did. As I quickly ran through the events of the past few days in my mind, I began to see something that made me uncomfortable. We had been more inclined to cut James some slack because he was gay. Even with all my doubts about him, without realizing it, I hadn't handled things the way I would have otherwise. It didn't make me feel much better to think that Peter and Mother had done the same as well. The astounding thing was, it wasn't as if I didn't know any gay people who are absolute shits. There was no rational reason to err on the side of faggots. However, the fact that Nelson was right wasn't something I was prepared to admit to him. Unfortunately, he seemed to read the truth in my face. I was grateful that he was enough of a gentleman not to say it. That aside, he said, whatever other reasons you may have for believing in James, I think that some of the things Agent Frederick said to you yesterday may have planted doubts in your mind, and you've come to me for reassurance. But the only answer I have for you is, I don't know. If he's a member of the Jihad, and at the moment, it doesn't matter, my job now is to try to find him. Like Tommy Lee Jones, I muttered. I beg your pardon. In The Fugitive, when he caught up with Harrison Ford in the tunnel, Ford said that he didn't kill his wife, and all Jones says is, I don't care. Not exactly that, Nelson said. Larry, believe it or not, we didn't come to you for reassurance, said Mother. We want to find James just as much as you do. There was a pause before Nelson spoke. You don't know where he is. Oh my God! I do believe you've surprised our Larry at last, I exclaimed. Oh, we'll have to mark this day in red on our calendar. Alex, please, said Mother. She turned to Nelson. I can honestly say we have no idea where James has gone. Interesting, he said, reverting to his usual maddening composure. Then it would seem that your part in this episode is over. Not quite, Larry. After all, we are concerned about the boy. It seemed to be our day to surprise Nelson. There was another pause before he spoke. You're not planning to try to find him on your own. Mother let out a laugh that couldn't have sounded more phony if she'd sung it in the middle of an aria. Don't be daft. Nelson continued, mindless of the interruption. Because it would be very foolhardy for you to do that. So far, the Red Jihad knows nothing of your involvement. If you were to put yourself in their way, just say that is one area in which Agent Fredericks and I are in agreement. It would be extremely dangerous. You're not completely barmy, said Mother, and we'd have no way of seeking James out on our own, even if we wanted to. Then I'm confused. What do you want with me? We'd like to clear up some loose ends. After all, Alex was shot at and our home life was turned upside down. We'd like to have some idea of what it was all about. Even with Mother's unnerving expertise at fabrication, she hadn't managed to sound very convincing. I don't think that could have escaped Nelson, but he didn't challenge her. You know what it was about. I mean the specifics of what happened. What do you want to know? Who was it that James called? I asked. It was the one question that kept nagging at me because somehow I felt that if James had told us the truth about this one thing, I could put my complete faith in him, despite his sexuality. Was it really his cousin? I'm afraid I don't know that. The call was made to a cell phone registered to a man living in an apartment in New York. His name is Joe Smith. You're kidding. Not very imaginative, if it's an alias. One thing that makes a very, very slight connection is that the real name of James's cousin, the one we know was in the Red Jihad, is Yusuf bin Akil bin Salam al-Ansari. Yusuf al-Ansari for short. Why is that a connection? Yusuf is one of the Arab equivalents of Joseph. Joe Smith. Oh, great, I said, rolling my eyes. He shrugged. I said it was slight. What was James's real name? In short, Khalil al-Kabah. How did that phone call result in the shootout? Mother asked. I'm afraid I don't know that either. Mother pursed her lips. Larry, is it your intention to allow us to ask you questions only to answer everything with, I don't know? I'll be glad to answer anything I can. Mother looked heavenward and sighed. Well, did you find out who the man was who tried to kill James? Yes. Oh, goody. We've hit the jackpot, I said wryly. He was a waiter. A waiter, Mother said with disbelief. He nodded. At a restaurant called the House of Persia. A waiter tried to kill James. Would you be happier if it had been a social worker? I said. I'm just surprised, she said at me through her nose. Then she turned back to Nelson. It's puzzling, isn't it? To a certain extent, Nelson replied. After we identified him, we checked his phone records. He received a call from Joe Smith's number the morning after you first took James to the bar. I said, so, James called Joe Smith, and the next morning Joe Smith called this guy. Nelson filled in the name, Samir, and put a hit out on James. Why? That's another one of the things I don't know. We've left with conjecture that either the Jihad or his cousin want him dead because of something in their prior history, or something transpired over the phone that made him a marked man. Did James tell you what they talked about? I shook my head slowly. Only that he told his cousin he was all right, and that his family was all right, and that he tried to be at the bar the next night. Nothing earth-shaking. Nothing that would make anyone want to kill him, you would think, Mother added. Assuming, of course, that James was telling you the truth, said Nelson. Yes, I replied tersely. But in his defense, and, by the way, I would defend anyone under these circumstances, James has never really lied to us. Of course, I knew he lied about knowing exactly where the chemical weapons were at the onset. But I understood his need to do that to get out of Iraq, so I wasn't counting it. He hasn't lied that you know of, Nelson said. I sighed heavily. All right, that we know of. I mean, he didn't tell us that he wanted to make a phone call. His doing it might have been going against your instructions, but it wasn't lying, per se. There was a smile behind his eyes. Granted. Have you talked to him? Mother asked. To who? To Joe Smith. Of course. She replied, her tone implying that she thought he was being purposely obtuse. Mr. Smith disappeared after making the call to the hitman. Wait a minute, I said. How do you know that? They had a tail on him. They lost him. They had a tail on him. How did they even know about him? Nelson responded with a raised eyebrow. Oh, of course. James's phone call. So, said Mother, James is gone and this Joe Smith person is at large. While the FBI wastes their time following us when we don't know anything, I said. They're doing other things as well, said Nelson. And the restaurant, the House of Persia. Did you talk to the people there? Mother asked. Yes. Nobody knows anything about anything. Are any of them in the Red Jihad? He shook his head. We have no way of knowing. Nelson, I said after a short silence, there's one thing you haven't told us. Well, there's a lot of things you haven't told us, but only one I'm interested in at the moment. How did you know about James? I'm afraid I don't know what you mean. About his connection to the terrorist group, and about the group itself for that matter. I mean, nobody knows what's going on in Iraq. He considered me a moment before answering, apparently weighing whether or not this was another matter to be divulged on a need-to-know basis. James was not the first person to want to defect. There have been others who we've helped in exchange for information. We'd been told about the Red Jihad and that they were planning to infiltrate the country and begin their acts. One of the few people identified to us by name was Yusuf al-Ansari. So a little digging revealed the names of his family. That's how you knew the connection to James. Yes. What a stroke of luck when he came to you, Mother said, her tone very ironic. That's just the problem. Perhaps it was more than luck. The implication wasn't lost on us. If James's request for asylum hadn't just been a coincidence, then he was here on a mission. But if James had come here to get involved in terrorist activities, why would he do it in a way that would put him under government scrutiny? Nelson shrugged slightly. Just another piece to the puzzle. Then again, he's proven it's not exactly difficult to disappear here, even if you are under government scrutiny. I could feel my face going red again. So, there really is nothing for us to do, Mother concluded. Nelson eyed her for a moment. That's correct. She rose from her chair. You understand, Larry, we feel somewhat responsible for James's welfare. Indirectly, at least, after all, he was in our care when he disappeared. From the bar, she means, I said quickly as I got up. I knew what she meant, Nelson said. Mother glanced at me as if disappointed to discover she'd raised the village idiot. Then turned back to Nelson. But you see, we did want to tie up the bits of information we didn't know, and make sure there was nothing we could do to help. I understand, he said, as he walked us to the door. What will happen if you find James? I asked. He looked at me in a way I can only describe as disquieting. It was as if the suspicion that we knew where James was had just come back to him. I don't know. That will be in the hands of the FBI, or the State Department. What do you think will happen? I said with increased impatience. If I were to hazard a guess, I would say that most likely he'll be deported. Sent back to Iraq? If Fredericks really believes he's a terrorist? Yes. He'll be murdered the minute he gets there. But then again, James was dead the minute he got on the plane to the U.S., wasn't he? You people tried to trick him into fingering the jihad. If he did, and it turned out he was a member, then Frederick's people would put him away. If he fingered them and it turned out he wasn't a member, the jihad would kill him. Either way, his life was over when he boarded that plane. Just when he thought he was starting a new life, and now, if you find him, you're going to send him back, where he'll surely be killed. Nelson stared at me for a moment. As Agent Fredericks so eloquently put it, once James fled, he became an FBI matter. And that's that. I'm afraid it is. He reached for the doorknob, then paused with his hand on it. He looked Mother directly in the eye. Jean, whatever you're planning to do, I very strongly advise against it. It wouldn't just be dangerous. If you go into any trouble, I don't know that I could do anything about it. And if I found James, I would have to take him into custody. She returned her coyous smile. Larry, I can assure you that we have absolutely no plan whatsoever. You know, as time goes by, I like Nelson less and less, I said as we walked back to the parking lot. Any reason besides the obvious, said Mother. Yeah, he makes me feel like a clunky middle-aged gypsy Rose Lee. No matter what we're saying to him, whether it's the truth or not, I feel like I'm doing a striptease against my will. You never were very good at lying, darling. You always make that sound like a bad thing. And after all, we weren't exactly lying to him, at least not entirely. I did want the facts filled in. I just wasn't completely honest about why. She paused and sighed. Larry really is being very perplexing about the whole matter. He's got me in a dither. Perplexing? How can you tell? He's always been a blank wall. I know. But this time, he seems like a very unhappy blank wall. It's so unlike him to show us anything, let alone tell us anything. I can't tell where he stands in this case. We reached the lot and started up the stairs to the second level. I'll tell you one thing. He has a hell of a lot of nerve saying that he would cut us loose if he thought he couldn't trust us. Trust us? After the way he'd used James, he'll be lucky if I ever trust him again. Shocking, Mother said distractedly. Don't you agree? What? Oh, of course I do, but I'm still puzzled. I can't get away from the feeling that something's up with Larry. Everything he's done in the past, excepting all the need-to-know nonsense, has been rather above board. Oh, come on. No, honestly. You've said it before yourself. Whatever else one may think of him, we've always been pretty sure of his veracity. I agreed reluctantly. It's unlike him to take part in something so underhanded. I mean, something that would put an innocent person in so much peril. This business of fooling James into exposing these people, that's assuming he thinks James is an innocent person. We'd reached the second level landing and Mother came to a stop. You know what I think? Whether or not he'll admit it openly, I don't think Larry believes for a minute all that chat about James being in the Red Jihad, which is what makes it even more of a muddle. I can't believe Larry would put that boy in danger. Unless he didn't know the real reason James was being brought here until it was too late. Oh, please, you give him too much credit. I opened the door and we walked out into the lot. Mother said, it's possible. Of course, I doubt he'd ever admit to that either. Don't be so willing to put such a positive spin on it. Nelson probably just seems off because he's pissed over having this case taken out of his hands. When we got to the car, Mother unlocked the door and climbed in behind the wheel, while I got in on the passenger side. Before putting the key in the ignition, she turned to me and scrutinized my face. You know, if you keep talking like that, I'm going to start thinking there's something up with you. What's bothering you? Besides everything that's happened, I replied, screwing my face up. She peered down that aristocratic British nose of hers, and in her most coiffed accent said, I think you know what I mean. I looked down at my hands for a minute and sighed. Do you think I've been prejudiced in James's favor because he's gay? Her expression immediately softened, and she lowered her nose. I think you've been prejudiced in favor of someone you know has been sorely used, as you would for anyone you felt that way about. I only managed a weak smile. I wasn't sure whether or not she was just being kind. I had too many doubts about my own motives to fully accept this. Thank you. Now, what are we going to do about him? To quote Larry, I don't know. We have to find him before they do. If the feds or the Red Jihad get him first, he's dead. What are we going to do? She stared at me unblinkingly for several seconds, then stuck the key in the ignition and turned it. I don't know how to tell you this, darling, but I wasn't lying to Larry about that either. I haven't the foggiest. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold.
to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. And in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.